On a quiet Friday night in October 2019, two men met for drinks on the northern end of the Gold Coast. Just hours later, both would be dead. One body was found in the wreckage of a crashed luxury car, the other days later dumped in bushland with a bullet to the head. One of the men was 36-year-old Shane Ross, former outlaw bikie and businessman, whose violent death brought a sudden and savage end to a life spent navigating the murky line between legitimacy and organised crime. What started as a simple social outing turned deadly, triggering a double homicide investigation that uncovered the complex and dangerous world Shane inhabited. Shane Ross lived a life steeped in contradiction. On the surface, he was a Gold Coast entrepreneur, a loving husband to Alexandra, and a doting father to 3 young daughters. But underneath the public persona was a man deeply embedded in Australia's underworld. Shane began his criminal trajectory as a member of the Lone Wolf outlaw motorcycle gang, where he was a nominee in 2012. The Lone Wolf gang, a smaller but notoriously violent gang, primarily based in Queensland, was known for its ruthless enforcement tactics and involvement in street-level crimes such as drug dealing and violent assaults. Despite its size, the gang earned a fearsome reputation due to its members' willingness to engage in brutal retaliation against rivals and enemies. According to police intelligence, he later patched over to the more feared Comanchero Motorcycle Club, one of Australia's oldest and most notorious outlaw bikie gangs, with a history dating back to the 1960s, and was believed to be a full member by 2014. These affiliations placed Shane in proximity to powerful criminal figures and exposed him to high-risk criminal operations. Police alleged Shane was involved in large-scale drug trafficking along the eastern seaboard, reportedly moving significant quantities of methamphetamine from Sydney's eastern suburbs north through Queensland. During a trial for convicted drug kingpin Ivan Tesic, an ice mule testified that Shane had been one of his regular delivery points, claiming to have delivered meth oil to him on 4 or 5 occasions. Shane also had a conviction history stretching back years. In 2011, he served an 18-month sentence for drug-related charges. In 2019, he was convicted in a sophisticated $4.5 million fraud operation involving luxury cars sourced from Queensland and New South Wales. Fake documents were used to secure loans on vehicles that were later sold for profit. Shane pleaded guilty to 3 counts of dealing with proceeds of crime and deception, but avoided jail, instead receiving an 18-month intensive correction order. Adding to the complexity of his life, in September 2018, Shane underwent life-saving surgery performed by celebrated neurosurgeon Dr. Charlie Teo to remove a brain tumour. The operation gave Shane another chance at life, a second act that would ultimately be short-lived. Just quickly, if you're enjoying this video so far and want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Professionally, Shane co-founded Monster Clothing, a streetwear label that tried to marry outlaw bravado with lifestyle branding. His business, however, drew scrutiny from authorities and former associates alike, with some claiming that the company was a criminal front used for laundering money and trafficking drugs. Shane's business partner was 47-year-old Cameron Martin. Together, they ran the company and maintained what appeared to be a close friendship. But their friendship raised concerns among some, especially Cameron's mother, Louise, who said she'd always been wary of Shane's past. She voiced concern about her son's involvement with Shane, citing concerns over his criminal history, bikie connections, and circle of colourful friends. Fearful, perhaps, of exactly the kind of ending that would eventually claim both men. On the night of Friday, October 18th, 2019, Shane Ross and Cameron Martin met for drinks at the Pine Palmer Tavern on the northern Gold Coast. Witnesses say the pair were socialising with at least 2 other men. It's believed they left the pub together in a dark-coloured vehicle sometime after 7 PM, heading to a park in Tallabudgera. What happened next is still not fully understood, but within hours, one man was dead and the other had gone missing. Around 9:30 PM that evening, Cameron was found dead in his white 2015 Mercedes, a different vehicle than the one they were seen leaving the pub with, which had veered off Tallabudgera Creek Road and slammed into a tree. Cameron's body was discovered slumped in the driver's seat of the Mercedes, initially believed to be a victim of a tragic accident, but paramedics observed a suspicious puncture wound in his chest. 3 days after Cameron's death, the search for Shane ended in grim discovery. His body was located in bushland, just 1.5 kilometers from the crash site, off the corner of the Pacific Highway and Talabudra Creek Road. He had suffered a significant head injury, believed to be a gunshot wound, consistent with a targeted execution. Gun casings, believed to be 9mm, were found near his body in Martin Shields Park. An autopsy later confirmed what investigators suspected. Both Shane and Cameron had been shot. What began as a routine traffic fatality investigation quickly unravelled into a double homicide case. Police believe Shane and Cameron had attended a gathering in the park after leaving the tavern, though the reason for the meeting remains unknown. Investigators quickly turned their focus to identifying who else was present and what led to the violent outcome. Authorities suspect Cameron was shot before attempting to escape in his Mercedes, ultimately crashing and succumbing to his injuries. It remains uncertain whether he was attacked at the same location as Shane, or if the two men were ambushed separately during the same deadly encounter. Given Shane's known associations with outlaw motorcycle gangs and his deep involvement in organised crime, investigators faced a daunting and challenging inquiry ahead, one that would prove to be anything but straightforward. In the days following the brutal deaths of Shane Ross and Cameron Martin, homicide detectives were left with more questions than answers. From the outset, police knew they were dealing with something more than a random act of violence. Detectives quickly launched Operation Romeo Masking, establishing a major investigation centre at Burley Heads. Teams were deployed to canvass the area around Martin Shields Park, searching for evidence in the thick scrub and murky waters of Talabudra Creek. Divers scoured the creek to search for the murder weapon, but found nothing of significance. The creek bed yielded an assortment of discarded items, including 2 old cars, a safe, fishing gear and an anchor, but no firearm or knife. A breakthrough hint emerged early on. A third man, reportedly seen stumbling along Talabudra Creek Road around 9:30 p.m. on the night of the murders. Detectives suspected this man may have been either a survivor, a witness, or a participant in the murders. The urgency to identify and locate him was immediate. Though there was no confirmation he had been shot, police believed he may have sustained injuries during the same violent encounter that left Shane and Cameron dead. Despite several witness accounts, the man had vanished without a trace, his role in the night's bloodshed unknown. Whether he fled in fear, was taken, or was himself eliminated remained unanswered. As investigators pieced together a 2-hour window between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m, the time Shane and Cameron were last seen leaving the Pimpama Tavern, and when Cameron's Mercedes crashed, a new clue emerged, a vehicle caught on CCTV. Security footage showed a white BMW X5 SUV pulling a U-turn and parking outside Martin Shields Park at around 8:18 p.m. on the night of the murders. The plates were confirmed to be fake. The vehicle remained at the scene for about an hour before speeding off, coinciding eerily with the estimated time of the killings. The CCTV footage became a cornerstone of the investigation. Though it failed to reveal the occupants, police were convinced the vehicle and those inside it were critical to understanding the night's events. The footage also helped link the murders to a larger and more dangerous underworld element. Authorities confirmed that key members of the Lone Wolf Gang were in the white BMW X5 the night of the double homicide. While police did not disclose exactly how they established this link, it was clear they had developed intelligence tying the gang to the crime scene and the logistics of the attack. Investigators suspected that Shane may have been deliberately targeted by members of his former motorcycle club or their associates in a hit that was both calculated and cruel. On March 13th, 2020, 5 months after the murders, police carried out a series of coordinated raids across Queensland, New South Wales and Sydney, targeting individuals connected to the gang. More than 200 officers from Queensland's organised crime gangs group, the Homicide Squad and New South Wales Police's Strike Force Raptor executed 22 simultaneous raids on homes, clubhouses and storage units believed to be connected to the murders. Among the targets was a Palmvale property in northern New South Wales, where police hoped to locate the elusive BMW X5. Though the vehicle remained missing, officers seized a trove of potential evidence: firearms, illicit drugs, large sums of cash, and mobile phones. The scope of the investigation was now clearly tied to the underworld. A major development in the investigation came on March 19, 2020, when authorities apprehended two men alleged to be senior members of the gang. Brody Singh, aged 42, known on social media as the national president of the Lone Wolf Gang, and Nathan Miller, aged 34, were taken into custody near the Queensland-New South Wales border. Both men were formally charged with 2 counts of murder with a circumstance of aggravation relating to serious organised crime, as well as 1 count of unlawful use of a motor vehicle. Shortly afterward, police issued an arrest warrant for a third alleged Lone Wolf member, Gary James Brush, aged 31, who was believed to be in custody in New South Wales at the time. Brush was formally charged with the same offences and was extradited to Queensland in February 2021 to face court. During Brush's court appearance, his defence lawyer requested an adjournment for the prosecution's brief to be prepared, with a mention that the case would eventually be heard alongside those of Singh and Miller. Brush was held in custody following the hearing and made clear his intention to fight the charges. Brush's involvement deepened the investigation's complexity, particularly given his apparent close ties to the victims. Brush had attended both the funeral of Shane's mother just 5 weeks before Shane's murder, and later Shane's own funeral, raising questions about the nature of his relationship with the victims and the gang. In a further twist, police arrested on May 15, 2020, Gabrielle Garner, the partner of Brody Singh. Garner was charged with 2 counts of perjury, accused of providing false testimony during the murder investigation. She was granted bail pending court appearances later that year, adding another layer of intricacy to the legal proceedings surrounding the case. In January 2022, the Southport Magistrates Court hosted a 2-week committal hearing into the murders of Shane and Cameron. The hearing was meant to assess whether the 3 accused men, who had always maintained their innocence, should stand trial for the killings. However, as the proceedings unfolded, it was the police investigation, not the accused, that came under scrutiny. Over the course of the proceedings, key elements of the Crown's case were dismantled, casting doubt not only on the strength of the evidence, but on the conduct of the officers who gathered it. Among the major revelations was that critical surveillance footage cited by police did not show what had been claimed in sworn affidavits. The footage had been used to suggest that Singh and Miller were in possession of 2 encrypted mobile phones, known as the red and green phones, linked to the alleged planning of the murders. However, during the hearing, it became clear the footage did not support this claim. The court learned that police may not have properly reviewed the footage before using it as justification to deny bail to one of the accused for nearly 2 years. Other evidence presented by the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial links, phone metadata, and vehicle movements, but the supposed connections between these and the accused began to appear tenuous as the hearing went on. It was evident the case had been constructed around inferences rather than hard evidence. One of the most notable elements to emerge during the hearing was a testimony revealing the dangerous and complex world Shane Ross inhabited before his death. The defence barrister representing Brody Singh, Saul Holt SC, brought forward testimony from Joshua Munn, a close friend of Shane. Joshua Munn gave chilling accounts of the threats and violence swirling around Shane in the lead up to his murder. Munn revealed that the day after the killings, he himself received a death threat with the words, "You're next," highlighting the violent undercurrents tied to Shane's dealings. Munn also testified that Shane owed millions of dollars to various criminal groups, including pretty much every single bikie club in the country and significant Sydney crime figures. These debts and entanglements reportedly left Shane vulnerable and marked him with a $500,000 contract on his head. Throughout the committal, the defence barristers were highly critical of the police investigation and prosecution's handling of the case. Saul Holt described the police disclosure of evidence as disgraceful, arguing that vital information, such as the death threats to witnesses like Munn, was withheld for over 2 years. Angus Edwards, defending Gary Brush, challenged the reliability of key evidence linking his client to the alleged murder, particularly disputing the significance of mobile phone location data and CCTV footage, pointing out inconsistencies such as Brush being recorded in different locations far removed from where the crime was allegedly coordinated. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, which drew sharp criticism from the judiciary. Justice Peter Davis, presiding over bail applications in February 2022, described the prosecution case as a shambles, lamenting the lack of coherent evidence and clarity from the Director of Public Prosecutions. The case was marked by confusion over how the movement of mobile phones on the night of the murders could concretely implicate the accused men. There was no forensic evidence tying them directly to the crime scene, making the prosecution's case tenuous. The hearing's conclusion in March 2022 brought a devastating blow to those seeking justice for Shane and Cameron. Magistrate John McInnes discharged all three accused, ruling that the prosecution had failed to present sufficient evidence to commit the men to stand trial. Key to this decision was the court's view that the evidence regarding possession of the secure cipher phones allegedly used by the killers was inconclusive, with the possibility that others may have had access to the devices. To make matters worse, the court's findings suggested that not only was the investigation flawed, but that the conduct of police during the legal process may have misled the court. In particular, the use of an affidavit that inaccurately described CCTV footage became a flashpoint in the controversy. It had been a cornerstone of the Crown's opposition to bail, and its discrediting brought the entire investigation into question. In April 2022, the seriousness of these issues prompted further action. The Supreme Court ordered that the matter be referred to the Crime and Corruption Commission for investigation. The Queensland Police, Ethical Standards Command and Police Minister were also asked to examine the conduct of officers involved in the case. The referral came in response to concerns that police had submitted false information to the court and failed in their duty to properly verify evidence before using it in legal proceedings. More than 2 years after Shane Ross and Cameron Martin were gunned down, the very justice system that was meant to deliver accountability for their deaths found itself under investigation for its own conduct in the case. No indictments would be presented and no one would face trial. For the families of the slain men, it was an outcome almost as painful as the murders themselves. When the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions confirmed in September 2022 that no further charges would be laid and the case would not proceed to trial, the reaction from Shane's family was one of disbelief and heartbreak. Shane's father, Les, expressed his complete loss of faith in the justice system. For a family already burdened by grief, the collapse of the case and the revelations of police misconduct compounded their trauma. The hope of accountability had been extinguished. They were left with no answers, no convictions, and a lingering sense that the system designed to protect the public had betrayed them at every turn. The murders of Shane Ross and Cameron Martin stand as one of Queensland's most haunting unsolved crimes, not only because of the brutal nature of their deaths, but also due to the profound breakdown of the justice system that followed. For their families, the pain is deepened by the lingering uncertainty that the full truth may never be uncovered. Their faith in both the courts and police has been irrevocably shattered. Until new evidence emerges or a witness comes forward, Shane Ross's murder will remain a cold case, just another name on the long, troubling list of gangland victims whose deaths leave behind more questions than answers. For now, this brings us to the end of the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Till next time, take care.